Okay, so some quick introductions. I'm Peter Thorpe from Australian Bookkeepers Network, and joining me today I've got Ethan Kearney from Practice Ignition. Ethan, thanks for joining us today for this fireside chat. Today we're going to talk about two things and two of the most common topics we commonly get here at ABN, both fixed fees and engagement letters. So before we jump into both these two topics, perhaps you could tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself and Practice Ignition.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Pete. Great to be able to speak to all the ABN members today and for anyone else who's listening. A bit of background on myself. I've worked in the tech industry with accountants and bookkeepers for the last 5.5 years or so. And Practice Ignition is a solution that really aims to solve the client engagement and onboarding problems. So all of you would be familiar that you've got to send out an engagement letter at the start of your engagement with your clients. You've then got to collect payment. You've got to integrate that back into your general ledger. What we're trying to do is tie all that together into a single source of truth and give you a central place to manage your engagements and help you to save time. And so we've been going since about 2011. And we've just recently grown like crazy over the last few years. And we've got offices in the UK and South Africa and the US, Canada, and obviously our main office here in Australia. And so that's a bit about us.
Terrific. And for those that don't know much about ABN, our purpose is to support Australian bookkeepers running their businesses. We kicked off in about the turn of the century, which was near enough to 20 years ago. We deliver a suite of learning options and resources to support bookkeepers, both technically, but also from a business building perspective. And in our spare time, we also represent bookkeepers to various levels of government through our recognised Bass Agent Association, Australian Bookkeepers Association. If you ever want to hear more about what ABN can do for you, just touch base with one of our friendly team by phone or jump on our website and have a bit of a free look. So, recently formed a stronger connection with Practice Ignition, and to mark the formalisation of this partnership, both our companies have extended a special offer to each other's bookkeepers in the bookkeeping community, and we're going to talk a little bit about that towards the end of this session. But so let's get started first, and we're going to have a bit of a chat about fixed fees. Ethan, to set the scene just for a little bit, we've essentially got three forms of billings that we're seeing bookkeepers using out there. We've got the traditional hourly rate. We're seeing fixed fees and a new version of fixed fees called value pricing. Hourly rate, as it sounds, simply involves setting a rate per hour, tallying up some hours, and billing your clients for an assignment based on the one multiplied by the other. Fixed fees involves setting a price for an agreed result, for an agreed assignment. Whereas value pricing is a little bit different to that. It talks about constructing a value-based service around a client's needs, often billed on a fixed basis. Now, for ABN members that want to take a deeper dive into the differences between the various billing methods, done a particularly good bookkeeper radio session in December last year with Di Lucas, who is a strong advocate of the value price model. And that was excellent. And I recommend anyone who's a member just to jump into the member section and have a look at that. But today we're going to have a bit of a look at the basics of fixed fee billing, and a little later on Ethan is going to show us how fixed fee billing processes can be highly systemised using the Practice Ignition processes. So who is using fixed fee billing? Ethan, our last survey told us that 57.2% of bookkeepers use fixed fee billing or a combination of fixed fee billing and hourly rate billing, while 43% said that they used exclusively hourly rate billing. We've been seeing a trend towards fixed fee billing, and that's been over a prolonged period of time, and that's continued right up to recent date. So, Ethan, what are Practice Ignition seeing as far as bookkeepers using fixed fee billing?
Yeah, that's a really interesting stat there, Peter. 57%. Yeah, so I think it really comes back down to the design of the business. I haven't really met too many bookkeepers who are 100% one way or the other. I think even the firms that have got, the majority of their clients on fixed fee are going to have a mix between fixed and hourly, because there's going to be projects that come along which don't fall into your standard service offering and packages. Really what it comes down to, and what we've seen, is the bookkeepers that have highly systemized their business and they understand exactly what's involved in terms of the inputs, are transitioning to fixed fee much easier. And so that involves really being deliberate with your packages and the scope. It often means, publicizing this is what's included with X, Y, Z. And rather than selling your expertise or services as, I'm a bookkeeper for X dollars per hour, you're really selling the value of the certain package that you're putting out there. And that requires you to get pretty clear on what it costs you to deliver that service as well. So it comes back to, what is your technology costing you on a month by month basis? What is the amount of time I spent doing this with X system, if you're using Receipt Bank or HubDoc or whatever. And so I think we're seeing a lot of success with our bookkeepers who have done the work and really understood what are the inputs so that I can efficiently offer this service. But certainly the vast majority of bookkeepers who use Practice Ignition are majority fixed fee in their business.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing, speaking to bookkeepers that have gone the fixed fee route, we're seeing like a number of really clear benefits, and they're pretty easy to articulate. Now, the obvious ones are around your admin time. So there's clear savings in your admin time in analysing timesheets and drafting complex bills, and as well as the debt collection process itself, because you can, fixed fees are far easier to automate. And we're also seeing that, well, bookkeepers are telling us in this current climate where we've got rapid improvements in technology, that there's actually an incentive for them to have a fixed fee and then use smart technology to derive efficiencies into the process. So, and everyone's a winner that way. The client's getting better use of technology, and they're getting the work often done a little faster, and there's actually an incentive to improve the client's business. So there's plenty of reason to do it. But if you look at the merit from a bookkeeper's perspective, it's fairly clear. But if you look at it from a client's perspective, what feedback are your clients of your bookkeepers giving you around their desire to see fixed fee?
Yeah, good question. And, I think it's a bit of a misconception out there that one thing that we hear quite often is, my clients won't want to pay me in this way. And there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, you may not have properly communicated the value of what this includes to your client. So they're a bit hesitant about paying you a fixed fee because they don't know what's included and what's not. But more so what we're seeing is the certainty around payments. When you can provide certainty around what your client's going to be paying you every month, and they're actually clear on what that includes, it sets a really good tone at the start of the relationship with your client. And it also means that down the track, when there's issues around scope creep, or if your clients want you to do some additional work for them, they know that it's likely going to be at an additional cost. And I was speaking to a bookkeeper last week, and the process that they go through is their client rings up, asks for more work to be done, and rather than having an awkward conversation saying, that's not included in your fee and all that sort of stuff, they say, yep, absolutely, I'll send you another engagement letter for that. Yeah. And if they've got an easy way of doing that, it's a really quick and efficient way of being able to properly charge for your time. Obviously, it assists on the budgeting front on both ends as well. So your clients know what they're paying you every month. You know what you're getting in. You can start to do some great forecasting, cash flow forecasting, etc. As you mentioned earlier, one of the massive drivers is having that incentive to do things quicker. So no longer are clients really paying you for what you're doing by the hour. They're paying you for the value that you can provide. And if you can do things in half the time because you've put in the research and work to setting up your systems and setting up your business efficiently, then why not charge for that value? Yeah. And I think the last thing really is that piece around clients not being worried about giving you a call or being, having to have that awkward conversation around what's included in the price. It just kind of takes that off the table. Yeah. That's the feedback that we're getting, Pete. Yeah,
look, mate, we're getting pretty similar sort of feedback. They're telling us the same sorts of stuff with regular and predictable work that they're doing. And in many cases, that's what bookkeepers do. A lot of it is regular and predictable. Fixed fee works really well. I think there's always going to be a place for hourly rate, especially for those one-off tasks or the special tasks that are hard to get a really clear scope defined. And so there will always be a place for an hourly rate, or maybe a short quoted amount, which is going to be based on a simple sort of guess, I suppose. There is an argument that hourly rate is, from the purist point of view, that is the only fair way because the client only pays for what they use. It also does guard a little bit against scope creep because you're telling all of the hours that have gone into it. So if the scope has creep, then you've actually caught up with it. But there's also a countering argument, I think, that we're hearing increasingly even from clients of bookkeepers, that why should they pay more when someone's done the work inefficiently? So there's a number of technical arguments one way or the other, but fixed fees does tend to work well for those certain or relatively certain and predictable assignments. And as you say, those short phone calls that broadly fit within it, the client's not wondering if they're paying for that 3-minute phone call. It's sort of generally scoped into a fixed fee assignment. I like fixed fee for a couple of other reasons. It tends to take the focus, the client's focus, off the input function and puts it on the output function. So the client's attention is then drawn to the output rather than the cost of an hour's input. So, example, for $500 a month, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z for you. So you can clearly know what you're going to get for your $500 a month. Versus, I charge you $75 an hour for an indeterminate output. So I like the focus it puts on the output rather than the cost of an hour's input. And I think you'd rather be benchmarked with your peers by the results that you deliver for your clients rather than the cost of an hour's worth of time. It also makes it harder for a client to shop around. Client shops around for a bookkeeper based on hourly rates. He's presuming that every bookkeeper has exactly the same ability and the same efficiency and achieves the same output for an hour's worth of time. And we know that's definitely not the case. So I do like where it puts the focus on the equation that's at hand here. I'm now focusing on what I'm going to do for you rather than a simple hourly rate. I guess let's say we've made that decision to move to more of a fixed fee style billing model. Have you got any tips that you see working really well for bookkeepers, both for their new and for their existing clients? And are there any approaches that tend to put the client base at ease when they're moving towards a fixed fee model?
Yeah, totally. And I just love that point. I just wanted to call that point out that you just made as well. It's really hard to differentiate yourself when you're charging on an hourly basis as well, because that's from a psychological point of view, that's how your clients are thinking about it. But as you said, if you do focus on the outputs, and that's kind of driving the conversation, and you're paying X for this, per month, it's much easier to set yourself apart from the competition, and it's going to be easier for you to direct the conversation away from price as well.
Yeah.
And really, price is only an issue in the absence of value, isn't it? So
correct.
The only variable then is your ability to communicate your value. And so it's really important. I think the first thing, before even talking to your clients about fixed fee, it does require a fair bit of thought just to as to how you're going to communicate the value of your service to your clients. And it's not necessarily then just about the pragmatic inputs. It could be, I'm going to help you spend more time with your kids, or I'm going to help you play golf on the weekend, like Pete's just done up in Cairns. It really comes back down to the messaging. What we've seen, to answer your question, Pete, is whenever there's a lack of communication, there's issue. So because a lot of bookkeepers come on and start using a tool like Practice Ignition, or they just simply send out a new proposal without firstly communicating with their clients, there's generally a fair bit of pushback. Where we've seen it work really well is when there's a combination of, whether it's a phone call to your existing clients, you might run a webinar, just something like we're doing now, get your clients on, talk to them about how you're going to be charging, talk them through your packages, talk them through if you're planning on grandfathering them over or migrating them over, and a series of emails too. So we've actually got email scripts and things you can use as a starting point too, to give you an idea of how to word things up and how to communicate that across to your clients. But communication is by far and away the best way to put concerns from your clients at ease. And again, taking that conversation away from the price and more focusing it toward the value that you're providing now.
Yeah.
Or
So
even formalizing it as well, just to add to that, you're probably doing a lot of this stuff anyway, but a great way to go about that is saying, hey, look, I've been doing X, Y, Z for you, as part of my fees, but what I'm looking to do now is formalize that. And I think, now more than ever, as I'm sure a large number of your clients have been through stressful times recently. They can see the value of the real-time data and real-time advice, can't they? So it's a great opportunity to say, look, now that you've gone through this, what about we formalize this going forward into a monthly agreement where I actually set time aside for you to do these kind of, whether it's budgeting or cash flow or whatever you're doing as part of your package.
Yeah, no, it's a good way to focus things. A couple of things that when I'm speaking to bookkeepers around the fixed fee billing approach, there's a couple of overview things that we sort of encouraged to think about. In the bigger picture things, you look at how much do you charge. We look at it and say, well, what's the value you're actually bringing to the table? What's it worth? What's it going to cost your client? What's the value to them to try and solve the problem themselves? So even if they were capable of doing it, how long is it going to take them? What's the opportunity cost of their time? Are they not selling something while they're mucking around with a payroll problem? So there's an actual value you're bringing to the table, which is their opportunity cost or the real cost of them having a crack at this thing themselves. And I guess you're also factoring into how much your bill is. What's the worth of what's the worth of the inputs you're bringing to the equation? What are your systems and processes worth that get an efficient job done, and your skill that you've built up over many years? What's that worth? So you got to be mindful of not underpricing that because the client may be a builder and he may have spent 20 years to be able to do what he does as well as he does, and he charges accordingly. And we should be always mindful of doing exactly the same thing. We always advocate people review their pricing. It's one of those things, you've got a fixed price. It's easy just to leave it there and not change it, but you should always be reviewing it regularly, increasing it at least annually for inflation, and also reviewing the scope of works that the client has that underpins the fixed fee, because that scope of works can increase. So you should take at least as a minimum an annual review. But if the client's activity is stepping up in that time frame, you may have to look at the overall engagement a little bit more closely, and you may not be able to wait for that annual look. We always advocate people, bookkeepers, review the fixed fees. So fixed fees are your best and most educated, I'll say, guess. I'll say there's more science in it than that, but you still want to review it. You want to review, are you actually achieving a result? So some benchmarking of those jobs in themselves against the inputs that are required to generate that return is pretty crucial. Some clients will tell you that their base level records are perfection on a stick. Often they are not. And if they're not prepared to modify what they do to make them that way, then you have to review the overall charge. It also makes sense to me to review your billing, particularly fixed fee, but also hourly rate to the market. Understand what your peers are charging, what's commercial out there in the marketplace, just to get a benchmark. And I guess no two bookkeepers are the same, but it's still useful to get some market intel as to what trends are evident in the open marketplace. One way of doing that is ABN. Also, ABN does an annual survey, so we keep tabs on trends on billings and way people are billing. So they're worth doing to get some comfort for your own circumstances. And
yeah, if I could just jump in there as well, Pete, I think one probably misconception that we've seen out there is that just because you're charging fixed fee doesn't mean you're not tracking time as well.
Yeah.
It is still really important to circle back and do that, that productivity recoverability analysis on your services as well. That I'd say is probably a step that's often missed. Is actually circling back and saying, all right, the first year of doing fixed fees, I might not nail it on the head because I don't know exactly how it's going to play out, and we're going to be doing a few things outside scope, and that's okay. But it's really important, firstly, for you internally to be doing your recoverability, reporting and that, but also then to be scheduling in re-engagement meetings with your clients as well, and sitting them down and saying, what sort of value is this to you over the last 12 months? How do we look at that? Is there something we can add? Is this still relevant to your needs? So doing that both internally then externally with your clients. And that's why I was saying at the moment is so poignant, going into the new financial year. It's a great time to actually be having these chats with your clients.
Yeah, you're absolutely on the mark. Kelvin's really strong on the review with his survey. And he benchmarks it probably a little bit differently. You benchmark and say hourly rate, be hourly rate, but he tends to look at it as a return per hour of the practice, irrespective of how you decide to bill. Because you could say I charge $100 an hour, but because you do so much other stuff that you don't charge for, then you might not be recovering $100 an hour. So it tends to look at your revenue and works backwards to a unit of input to say, okay, what's my true recovery for my business hours input? So it's pretty important to do.
Yeah,
probably the biggest overall issue we have with people jumping on this thing is scope creep, and you touched on it earlier. Scope creep is probably the natural enemy to fixed fee, because once a client sees fixed fee, he knows that he can try and tuck whatever extras he wants into this fixed fee. You have to guard against this, otherwise you end up just working for free. So to guard against your client pushing the scope, and he may not be doing it, but really his business may be just evolving, and your engagement needs to evolve, or your scope of works needs to evolve with it. So to guard against that, you really should have a strong engagement letter that clearly defines the scope of work that's going to be covered by the fixed fee, and how you're going to treat those additional services that are outside that scope of works, whether it be an hourly charge, or maybe it's a separate quotation for if it's a project that's got edges that you can define. And I think probably a message there is don't be afraid to redraft your engagement letter. I see a lot of bookkeepers draft an engagement letter. They did it 15 years ago, and it's still in the cupboard somewhere. They don't know if they had to find it. They probably couldn't. So don't be afraid to redraft the engagement letter, because the scope of works will increase, and you need to keep the thing as a living document. It's got to reflect your current circumstances, because if it ever came to resolving an issue and your engagement letter is 15 years out of date, it's probably not going to be worth the piece of paper it was written on in the first place.
And if I can jump in there as well, Pete, it is really important to do that, because the technology that you're using is I'm sure it has changed in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of those technologies that you're using have their own sort of terms around data ownership and potential loss of data, and particularly because everything's cloud now as well. So it's so important to have up-to-date terms so that you're covering those sort of breaches or anything that could potentially happen with your client's data. Again, that's another thing that we see a lot. The second thing is actually not having an engagement at all, because the bookkeeper says, I've just worked with this client for 5 years, 10 years. I don't need one. That's fine. We actually see the other side of it when there is a fee dispute and it goes to legal. The benefits of having an engagement letter are just vastly superior. So what is your position on engagement letters, Pete?
We're very strong on engagement letters. So we the need's obvious. Funny enough, there's no legal requirement to have an engagement letter with your client, which seems a bit silly. But to me, it's just a little bit like selling your house without a contract. Now, it's dangerous, leaves you open to a number of adverse outcomes. So you never think about selling a house without a contract. Well, why would you sell your services without a contract? It just leaves you exposed. The tax practitioner board, while not compelling it, strongly encourages it. They use words like they recommend you have a written agreement with the client setting out terms and conditions of the engagement, and their logic and their reasoning is that it helps create a clear understanding of the engagement and avoids uncertainties over fees and scope of creep in the scope of works, which we sort of know. It can also assist in supporting bookkeepers' compliance with the code of conduct, which is probably a big point. There's no direct code item that says you must have an engagement letter, but there is a code item 6, which talks about sharing of client information. So it's quite common out there in the accounting and bookkeeping profession to use contractors. So now that contractor can be a local contractor, or it could even be an offshore contractor. Now, you've got a code item 6 which says that if you're going to share a client information with a third party, and any contractor, be they an offshore contractor or a local subcontractor, a third party, if you haven't advised the client that you're going to do that, then you've breached code item 6 and you're leaving yourself open for sanctions, and this can be as severe as suspension of your agent's registration. So it's pretty important to do.
Mm-hmm.
In their fact sheets on the topic, the board suggests very strongly that the engagement letter is probably the ideal place to communicate the fact that yes, your work is being sent to Malaysia or whatever it is. The client consents, then happy days. The worst case is your client finds out that you did use a subcontractor. Information was shared with a third party without their consent. They can complain to the board, and you've probably got a really serious case to answer for. So it does help with your code of professional conduct compliance. So for that reason, it makes sense to have this thing done. We're probably going to unpack some of the elements of an engagement letter shortly, Ethan. But you would have seen a lot of different engagement letters with practice ignition because you deal with a lot of different people. But can you give our listeners just a bit of a sense of what elements you're normally looking for in a decent engagement letter?
Yeah, absolutely. And great point there about offshoring. That's what I was sort of referring to earlier in regards to ownership of documents as well with the technology solutions you're using as well. So that's firstly a really important thing to have in there. Obviously, you're going to have your client's details and the entities that are covered by that engagement letter, the fees, so all of your billing cycles, whether that's on a fixed or hourly rate. The payment terms, so how you're actually collecting payments from your clients, the scope of the work, so the responsibilities on both sides. So this, again, I think is something that's commonly left out. You'd likely have your sort of responsibilities in the engagement letter, but potentially you haven't added in your client's responsibilities as well. Keep in mind that they are signing this as well. So this is really important to have that spelled out, the actual scope of the work that they're agreeing to, which then makes that conversation, as we discussed earlier, when you're re-looking at scope and re-looking at your inclusions, it makes it a lot easier. The output, so all the reporting, any deadlines and targets, lodgement obligations, any team members internally that are going to be assigned to a client's file, who else is going to be looking over their data. The outsourcing and offshoring thing with item 6 is obviously really important as well, considering so many bookkeepers are using outsourcing now. Record keeping and any sort of additional requests from the clients. But I think, the most important thing that we've seen in there is really around, who gets access to the data, where is it stored, because you just have to look in the news to see the amount of data breaches that are happening nowadays. So that's really important. One of the cool thing you can do, if you've got a tool like PI, which I'm going to show you in a little while, you can actually loop in some of your other authorizations into the engagement letter as well, and get it all signed in one. So whether it's, your STP, your VAT authority or whatever. You can actually get that signed as part of the engagement letter too, which would just be one less document for them to sign. So you can fit quite a fair bit in there. And I mean, it'd be interesting to see the stats, wouldn't it, as to how many clients actually read the whole engagement letter. But the point is that you've got it there to fall back on. Yeah, no, absolutely.
When do you find that people actually end up referring, like you've got those clients that have got them, how often or what purposes are they typically referring back to their engagement letters?
Probably two main things. I mean, in the negative, it would be if there's a dispute around fees or something's happened with the data, then they would have that to fall back on, which is really important, obviously. But in the positive front, I do see a lot of bookkeepers referring to the engagement letter with the re-engagement process. So you're sitting down with your client at the end of the year. Let's read through the engagement letter. We've got XYZ services in there. What did you think? It's still providing value to you. You're doing that as a cross references to the services you actually provide. So how bang on were you at the start as to what you're actually delivering? How far have your deliverables strayed from the original scope of the work? And just for your own sort of record keeping, you can actually start to use it in segmenting up your client base as well. So if you've got a system in place, you can actually start to slice and dice and say, how many of my clients am I offering service X to as opposed to service Y, and start to even do some CRM type functionality, which you can do in something like PI. And so that's sort of the main two scenarios in which we see people referring to the engagement letters. Well,
I guess we're pretty much finding the same thing, is that they often they do get referred to when they're built in the first place, and I guess how you present it to your client is important. We'll touch on that in a minute, but often they're there to sort out a problem. The tax practitioner board tell us that they get involved in disputes. The most common two revolve around a fee complaint, which they can't help you with anyway, or the scope of works. And the scope of works is a big deal because the client often says, person was supposed to do X, Y, and Z, and they didn't do it. And then the bookkeeper says, oh, no, I wasn't. And the client said, oh, yes, you were. And there's no engagement letter that actually confirms what you're supposed to do. So you're leaving yourself horribly exposed. So pretty well, scope of works and fees are the main reasons that we're seeing people referring to engagement letters. They are an easy reference point when resolving a fee dispute. Often they're solved quite quickly. Client signed the agreement, even if they say they didn't sign it, they didn't read it, they still signed it. So you normally can solve a fee dispute quite quickly, and it's quite clear. Often if they're a fixed fee, which we were speaking about earlier, that's really easy because you've got a fixed fee. It was a dollar figure that was agreed, and if you've automated, there's not much to dispute really, is there? So you probably have a lot less fee disputes that way. So look, we're seeing in many cases engagement letters are really a bit of a bum covering exercise for many people. They're there to solve disputes, but I tend to look at them a little bit differently. Yes, they do that, and it's an important reason for them to exist. But I look at them a little bit differently on two fronts. In many cases, they can actually prevent the dispute. Because the whole of the engagement is well scoped out up front and you discussed it with the client, everyone knows exactly what to expect. It's a means of preventing a dispute in my mind rather than resolving one, because you spoke about it up front and it's well scoped out in the letter to the client. Even if they haven't read it, you should at least talk to them about it anyway. So everything's sort of far more upfront. So I call them prevention documents more so than resolving documents. They're also a useful marketing document. So it gives the bookkeeper a chance to share with the client full range of services and skills that are on offer. Even if the client's not going to use them straight up front, they may say, oh, well, at least I'm now aware of what services you've got. I may need that in the future. I might be looking at some cash flow protections, whatever it is. It's a great place to do a little bit of marketing. As I said, to answer your original question, I'm a strong fan. I just think I think you're nuts if you don't have them. Even for those friendly clients that you've been working with for 10 years, I still think it's a good thing to do. And if you think about it, that client may not know that you do cash flow projections. So it's a handy way to sit down and have a chat with them. As I said, you would have seen an awful lot of engagement letters through practice ignition. Do you see a standard form for these things?
Oh, gee, it's kind of how long is a piece of string. There's different franchise groups and networks and associations, such as yourselves, that have recommended engagement letter templates that are used. But we've seen so many variants ranging from 2 or 3 pages up to 250 pages long, depending on what's involved and who's involved. So I think there's certainly common territory, and we discussed some of the common things, common inclusions earlier. And those are sort of the key things to include. But the length really does vary. And, what we've seen is that most people do use something from the association they're a part of, whether that's the ABN, for bookkeepers, or for accountants, whether it's the CA one or the CPA one or whatever. We've actually got a standard one in PI as well, that you can sort of use as a starting point. But really, we do recommend actually going through it and getting it reviewed by a lawyer as well with yourself, so that that what you've got there does stand up as well, and it's comprehensive enough. So we've seen so many. Pete, do you have a view or a recommendation as to what bookkeepers should include, or what?
We sort of do. The length of the engagement letter, there's no perfect solution here. We look at it a bit like Goldilocks porridge, but I think there's a happy medium in all of this. If you go too brief, you run the risk of not offering sufficient protection for the bookkeeper and covering off on those things that you do need to. But you go too long for your 250-page version, then the risk is you're going to scare off your brand new client, or have them refuse to sign it or send to their lawyer, and it just delays the start of what should be a smooth assignment. So I think there's a happy medium there. We put out an engagement letter. We don't expect that bookkeepers will use it blindly. We just put the common threads that need to be in there, and they can add to and delete from to suit. But I think whichever way you go with this thing, I think that the smart thing, particularly when you're going to first introduce an engagement letter, is not to have it turn up in the mail, because we're fighting adverse outcomes out of it. So I think the smart thing would be to do is, if it's the start of an assignment, or if we're going to now introduce your engagement letters to your existing clients, is to flag it verbally. And so this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. Client knows they're going to expect it, they know what's going to be in it. And arrives, they know its purpose, and they know it's just as much for their own benefit as it is for the bookkeeper. So it's not a document that you need to be scared of and need to get legal advice on. It's just something that that protects both parties. So, but if you flag it verbally, you find even if they don't read it, they know what's in it because you've told them what's in it in heading terms. So I think it's smart just to have that conversation before they get it to sign it. What's the right time to do an engagement letter, mate? Do you have a view of that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things there. There's, I think that whenever there's a change in the scope of works, it's really important to update the engagement letter. I know that this sounds like a lot of work, and the what this process has been like in the past is obviously editing the thing in Word, and you're sort of sending it out to your clients, and you might be, hopefully you're not mailing it to them, their PO box, and then waiting for it to get signed and returned to you. But the whole idea of what we've done with PI is making it really easy to edit your engagement letter. So if you need to send out, an amendment, or you need them to sign something else, it doesn't take heaps of time internally, and it's easy for them. They can just do it on their phone or computer. So whenever there's a change in the scope of works or a change in the approach to how you work, perhaps it's a bit of new software that you've introduced as well. It's worth just reviewing, exactly where that data is stored, and go, your general due diligence on the software, obviously, which I hope most people are doing. But review where the data is stored, review how it's stored, and then if you need to, add an inclusion in your existing engagement letter. And you might not send that out again immediately, but you might include it for your next year engagement as well. So I think it's important to be reviewing that every year. Peter, I imagine that ABN have a couple of templates, and we're going to talk about the partnership with PI in a few minutes. But what are the templates and things that you guys offer to bookkeepers?
We've looked sort of closely at the engagement that most of our bookkeepers take on, and they're a little bit different from bookkeeper to bookkeeper. But look, we've got our standard engagement letter. We'll call it a standard one if there is such a thing, and that covers most BAS agents for what they do, and it covers like your general bookkeeping services and BAS agent services. Obviously, you can menu up that engagement letter if you have a certain range of specialties, but it all fits within that templated version that we put out there. So that's probably our main one. We do a subsidiary one of that where the bookkeeper is just undertaking bookkeeping assignments, so they may not be a BAS agent. And in their case, it's particularly important that the engagement letter scopes out services that could be deemed to be a BAS service, because they don't want to be in trouble with a tax practitioner's board for offering a BAS service. So it's important that their engagement letter scopes that out, and that the client's actually aware that they are, if they're not a BAS agent, that they can't do certain things. So that's important. And we also have one for payroll services, which is I'll say, relatively recent addition.
Why have you got a separate one for payroll services, Pete?
It's a good question, because we had a couple of years ago, we developed a separate template, and it covered off on payroll services, and we're assessing some trends emerging within the payroll space. So we engaged our legal beagles, and we put together a specialist template for payroll. And it's really in response to the increasing complexity around payroll, and the fact that it had become the #1 complaint area given to professional indemnity insurance. That is the single largest area for resolution. So it clearly was an issue. The Fair Work's relatively recent push on accessorial liability, saying, okay, well, they've definitely now got an interest in pushing the accessorial liability beyond the client and pushing it out to any professionals that were involved. So, the complexity there, professional indemnity insurers and Fair Work's push in the area, important. Like the accessorial liability, you can be responsible for some of the sins of your client. Where you're a knowing party to a Fair Work breach, it doesn't mean you have to benefit from it, but you can be in the firing line. So it's really important to protect yourself from a payroll engagement going badly. And if you think about payroll, there's no right side. You can't say, oh, well, I didn't go over it by a certain amount. If you understate or underpay, then you've got exposure to an employee or Fair Work if you've undermet conditions, or if you've overdone it, you've actually got an obligation to your client. So the only answer you can get with payroll is right, right or wrong. And if it's wrong, you're hoping it's only by degrees, because you're responsible to someone somewhere in the equation. And because it's such a particular area, we figure it makes sense to have it well scoped out. You really can't effectively, in 2 or 3 lines, encapsulate a payroll assignment in a standard engagement letter. And if you did, you're going to be adding too many pages to it. So we figured that because not all bookkeepers were doing payroll, a good chunk are, but if you're going to do it properly, and a payroll engagement letter makes a lot of sense. Because if you think about it, if we're going to have disputes over payroll, and you could be facing professional indemnity insurers or Fair Work or what have you, what better way to defend yourself than with an engagement letter that the client signed off on? So if Fair Work come along and say, okay, you made the wrong award interpretation on a particular payroll sense, and the award interpretation was actually the client's obligation, and it's spelled out in your engagement letter, then you've got something to hang your hat on. But if you've got no specific payroll engagement letter, you're actually you're somewhat exposed. So look, that was our thinking in putting together a payroll engagement letter. Again, the client can tailor that to suit, and it certainly makes sense that they do. And I know you guys are extremely strong on engagement letters as part of your structured onboarding process, which is really neat. You showed me that not so long ago. Is there, I suppose now is as good a time as any for you to give us a bit of a look at the Practice Ignition engagement letter process, and maybe if we've got enough time, we can then jump through and have a bit of a demonstration on how you handle your fixed fees through the software. So I'm going to hand over the controls to you, Nathan. And
cool.
I'll call you Nathan. It's Ethan.
You're close.
That's near enough. It rhymes with Ethan.
That's right. That's right. Well, okay. So hopefully you can see my screen coming through there now.
Yep, I can.
But, so all of this stuff, I mean, like I was saying earlier, was once upon a time a real pain, wasn't it? I mean, if I'd asked you to review your engagement letter every year, you would have to pull out your dusty old document from your filing cabinet, go through it, and then you might have to make some changes in Word, print it off, send it to your clients, get them to sign it in when they come through. And frankly, it's just another bit of paperwork that you don't want to have to deal with. So that's part of the reason why Practice Ignition was developed, is to solve the major pains here. So I might start off on the services, just with our initial discussion around fixed fees. One thing that we've got in here, which would be really worth, and if you get nothing out of this, jump in and sign up for a trial of Practice Ignition and you get access to this for free. We've actually got a whole range of example services that you can take a look at, which are over 40 of the most popular services offered in your region. So they're actually benchmarked against real world prices and common deliverables as well. And what you can then do is import those into your PI account. You can export them out to Excel and just have a look at, and there's a mix of services in there. There's accounting and bookkeeping. You can see there's some COVID related or business continuity services in there as well. Yeah. Jump in and have a look and just see how other people are structuring and pricing out their services. And it might give you some good ideas as to how you might look to present these packages as well. But what I wanted to show you is the actual process for doing a proposal and then adding an engagement letter. So we're going to talk about adding this for a new client now, but you can do this for your existing clients. If I was to go through the PI platform and create my proposal name, which in this instance is just my bookkeeping, I would then have a date range for that proposal, which might be, for the next financial year, or it might be for the next couple of years, or for the next 6 months, whatever it is. I would then go in and basically add each of those menued up services into this proposal, which is what Pete was referring to earlier. So you can have then each of your different services mapped out into your proposal here. And that way the scope of the work is so clearly defined. You can see you've got your bookkeeping services up to 200 transactions here. This includes X, Y, Z. It doesn't include this, requires an active subscription, which is obviously not included. And then, in this instance, we're doing our BAS as well as part of this proposal. What I can then do really quickly is if I needed to add another service, so, you're not using Xero, we're going to put you on Xero as well. I might put you on our cloud accounting software subscription here, which will be $50 a month. And now you can see that separately scoped out in the proposal.
That's quick.
It is super quick. And you can see there's pricing in here as well. That pricing can be templated or mapped against the service, and you can change up the way that you're billing as well. So whether you're wanting to bill fixed fee, a recurring amount each month, or you might want to bill upfront, or you could bill it on completion of the work and split the payment upfront as well if you want to take a deposit. Or if you did want to, you could bill on an hourly rate and say, look, it's going to be charged at $50 an hour or whatever your rate is. And so you can actually combine multiple billing types in the one proposal, which I think is pretty cool. You can have your monthly recurring work up the top, and maybe they need some rescue work as well. You could actually scope that out as being a separate service in the proposal and say, this is going to be charged hourly because I don't know how much of a mess your books are, but the fixed fee starting from after we've done your rescue work is going to be X dollars per month. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
The second thing on the engagements front, and this is part of the partnership that we've got with ABN now, is that bookkeepers actually have access to those templates directly within PI, which is really cool. So whenever I want to go out and send a new proposal to my clients, I don't have to muck about with a Word template or a PDF and change and control, find and replace into my client details. I just have to select the template, which is loaded in there, and it automatically pulls all my client info, all my service info, the pricing and payment schedules, all of that stuff into the engagement letter, which means you don't have to worry about doing it. And so that means that when we come to re-engagement, if there's a change in the scope, I would just adjust my proposal and the engagement letter would essentially automatically update, and you can get your clients to sign it again or not. Which I think is really cool. So that's part of the new partnership that we've got with ABN for members. And if you're not an ABN member, we'll have your contact. You should be.
Sorry.
You should be. And we'll give out Pete's contact details at the end. It's really important to be able to make this as easy as possible. One other thing that I wanted to touch base on, and you talked about this earlier, Pete, in terms of the first point of communication is not receiving a 30-page document. You can actually now include videos in your proposals as well. So you can have a personal message, you can have a video, you could record yourself in a Loom, which is a quick camera video as part of the proposal as well. And then what that will look like for your clients is really cool. And so if you think of an engagement letter as being boring, I'm hoping that this is going to give you a bit of wow factor, but rather than your clients seeing a pretty boring looking, Word document or proposal come through, basically they're getting this dynamic proposal now on their phone or computer, which looks like this. This brochure here can be customized to have all of your services in there, a bit of background on your business, maybe client testimonials, whatever you like. We actually build these brochures for you as well. If you're wanting to come on board with PI, we'll construct one of these for you. And on the right-hand side, you can actually have a video of yourself running through the proposal. You can have a personal message there. But the important thing is that it's clearly scoped out the work for your clients. So each of those different services is mapped out for them. They can see exactly what they're paying each month, which in this instance is $510 a month. If there was a different amount being billed, recurring on completion hourly rate, that would be listed out here. They can then put in their payment details in the same workflow, so they can actually put in their BSB account number, their direct debit details in the proposal, or they can pay via credit card. You can also arrange payment externally, but if you're wanting to use PI's payment gateway, they can put their payment details in there and then, and then read through your terms as well, which is excellent. So basically, they can download that to PDF. They've got all of the scope of the work you can see here automatically included. And one cool thing that you can actually do is if you're doing payroll for them, for example, you can, if you select a payroll service as part of the inclusion, that can automatically add a clause in to your engagement letter with all the payroll specific terms. And whether you're wanting to put in your SCP, finalizations or authorities in there, you can do that automatically, which is really cool. So you tick in all your boxes and you're automating it and templating it as much as you can, which is saving you guys a lot of time. Your clients basically tick the box, digitally sign it, and then click the accept button. So it's super easy for them.
Well, that's a, like you said, that's a heap of efficiency in it, but it's also a good marketing document, isn't it?
Totally.
You're actually getting the most out of it. You're not stuck with a 250-page lawyer teaser. You actually got a document that's friendly.
Yeah. And I think that the engagement letter is really not the place, in my opinion. And I know you mentioned this is a possibility earlier, but I don't think the engagement letter is the place to be trying to include, potential services that you might offer your clients. It's something that's sort of signing away your business terms. You're signing up on the payment schedule. It's kind of, let's get the paperwork done and get on with it. But if you've got something like this at the forefront, of the proposal, when you're talking through it with your clients, this is the place to sell the services. That you could offer them potentially, as well as your website and so on. So that's the process for bookkeepers who want to use PI. You can also have videos and things as well. So you can have
videos are cool.
Yeah, really cool.
That.
It's actually quite a new feature. And I've just gotten an email on my phone saying Ethan has accepted your proposal. So you'll get a notification straight away. The payment's all automated. It reconciles back into Xero automatically. If you're using a workflow tool like Is There a Practice Manager or Carbon, it will deploy the relevant job templates in there automatically. So there's a whole bunch of efficiencies and things you can get from it. But coming back to that core time saver of actually just building proposals quickly and engagement letters quickly, that's primarily what we're looking to do. The cool thing here is that it's particularly relevant at the moment as well, is when you're then reviewing your scope with your clients, all I have to do is search for my client, click on the proposal, and I can see exactly what was included last year. I can see all the invoices and payments. I can see any questions that they've asked about that work. I can see all the jobs that it relates to. I can see and have a record of the signed engagement letter at any point in time as well for my clients. So it's all documented and stored, and it's a single source of truth essentially for your engagements. And if I wanted to adjust it, I can do that easily too.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to like about that. It's definitely got to speed up the process. And when new clients coming on board, you don't want to wait for 2 weeks while paper goes backwards and forwards, and they think about, oh, that's a big document. Oh, you don't want them to rethink. You just want them to say, okay, well, I've made a decision. I want to move. How do I get this happening quickly?
The other thing, which is really interesting, and I know that sales is a bit of a dirty word, but if what you are doing is selling your services. If you actually look at sales psychology, the sooner you can get your clients an engagement letter and a proposal in front of your clients, the more likely they are to sign with you. If your potential clients are shopping around on price and you're taking a week to get back to them with your proposal, that's another 5 days that they've been able to call up other bookkeepers and start to second guess. Whereas if you've had the closer you can get to the value tied to the price, the more likely you are to win clients. So if you're having your initial meeting with your clients, you wow them, they're really keen to get started with you, and then you're able to send them a proposal that same day, you're going to be winning, as opposed to sending them, I'll get you a proposal by the end of next week. Yeah,
it makes sense. Like they've made the value-based decision to buy. They've asked for the next step, so you're better off getting the engagement underway rather than giving them a week's grace to go and speak to their partner, their lawyer, their accountant, another bookkeeper, mate at the pub, whatever it is. You're better off getting the engagement done and underway as soon as you possibly can.
And even bookkeepers that are actually, they've been using PI for a while and they know their way around it, will actually be doing the proposal in that initial meeting as well. So you can say, oh, I've just sent you a proposal, it's on your phone. The client can then actually, and the record is like 3 minutes, like as the client was leaving the office to jump in a cab, he signed it on his phone and they've collected the first payment already. So there's the benefits of that as well.
It makes sense. Yep. Mate, that's pretty well. You got any more to show us? So that'll do us for today. I'm sure someone signs up for a bit of a demo, you'll take them further if they want to get into some more detail.
Absolutely. What I might do actually, I'll just run through where there's a bit more information about the partnership as well, for those of you who are listening in. So we're pretty excited to be able to offer those templates and some special pricing for ABN members as well. So you actually get 50% off our starter plan for the first 3 months of your subscription, which adds up to a considerable amount. And you actually do get a 2-week trial as well. So at the very least, jump onto landing.practiceignition.com/ABN, sign up for the trial, get those engagement letter templates, get the services and have a look. Basically you get access to these 3 templates, get access to special pricing, special coaching as well, one-on-one training, all within the app. And you're definitely right, Peter. You'll get taken through, step by step, and will help you to set up your account. So I think that's pretty powerful for any of you who are listening in. You think, oh, it's too much effort to worry about my engagements. This might be an easy way to actually take that first step and say, all right, I might try using PI, and we've already got the templates in there, so it's going to take you about 30 seconds to sign up and send a proposal using the template.
Yep. And for any practice ignition bookkeepers looking to engage with ABN, we've also reciprocated with a concessional pricing model. So you get a couple of months free with a 12-month membership, which is a good chance to get a bit of a deep dive. And if you're still looking to be convinced that it's a good move or not, you can jump onto our website. You'll see a little bit about the relationship with PI, but you'll also be able to book a tour. So simply book an obligation-free tour, and they'll give you a really good tour of all of the resources that you can enjoy as an ABN member. There's something in it for everyone, from insurances to BAS lodgement if you're not yet a BAS agent, to guidance on all sorts of things, as well as your technical resources and reading and CPE and blah, 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 blah. There's plenty there for you.
And the community aspect too, as well, which at the moment is probably one of the biggest things I've heard great feedback on, is that sort of community discussion and support from other bookkeepers as well. So
community
not to be understated.
Strong. With events and bookkeeper radio and coffee clubs and whole manner of things that are there for community. So it's no matter what you're looking for. So we're very much looking forward to getting the most out of future relationship with Practice Ignition. It's a tremendous fit for our members, and I just think we'll see a lot of good things happen for the industry over the next little bit.
I think so. Thanks for having me, Pete.
Mate, that's pretty well us. I'd say thanks for your time today.
Great. Thanks everyone for tuning in as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Ethan. Bye-bye.